Hello and welcome to this episode of Get to Know. I'm your host, Maisan Bharati. Hope everyone is having a nice noon. Today we have a really special character with ourselves. We have with ourselves today Professor Schaschek, a well-known professor here at HDM, especially among the students. I would like to say that Professor Schaschek is really helpful all the time. Whenever I have any question, I don't even hesitate. I always go to him, I ask him the questions. And whenever we see each other in the hallways, I'm like, hi, Professor Schaschek. And Professor Schaschek is like, hi, Maisam. So I feel like among the professors, Professor Schaschek is the one students are the most close to somehow, especially for me also. Professor, welcome to our show and thank you for accepting our invitation.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. So Professor Schaschek has background in mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, physics, and nuclear physics. Professor, let's start with the origin of this story. I want to start with the origin of the story. Let's talk about where were you born, where did you study, where did you go to college, where did you go to university, or where did you go to school? Let's start with these questions.
Okay, so I was born in northern Rhine-Westphalia, in Siegen. So that's a little town in northern, in the Sauerland, Siegerland. But we moved in the mid-60s, we moved to Hessen, and there I went to school. I graduated from school in 1979.
Okay.
And then I had to do the mandatory military service and started studying in 1980. So, and over there I did physics, nuclear physics, as you mentioned, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering were partly involved, but it was most physics, and I wanted to do biophysics, but there was a problem in this department, so I finally found a professor that I found helps to get involved in stuff at all, and in nuclear physics in especially, and so I decided to do nuclear physics. So that's not related to nuclear power plants or so.
So was this your master's degree or?
This was not, at this time it was diploma.
Diploma, okay.
Yeah, and the funny thing at this time, I think that's worthwhile to mention to the students, professors would enroll or register your diploma thesis. Okay. So you wouldn't, as a student, you wouldn't do that. And they would also find out when you're finished.
Okay.
So and that was quite a delicate situation because you were really heavily relying on, what is it? Yeah.
The connection maybe between
that you connect
and the
nicely and that he really acknowledged the work that you have done. So for me it took something like 3 years to finish my diploma thesis.
Okay. Yeah, how long was it normally? Is it like 3 years?
Half a year, yeah. So in the SPO,
okay,
it was something like a half a year, but then finally, you know, it was nuclear physics. We had to study plutonium-242, and that's quite a dangerous material. So the question is how to get it. In Germany at this time there was no material like this. So there was a source in the United States and probably in Russia, but you know, at this time connections to Russia were not so close. So we tried to get hold of material from the United States and it didn't come. So I was postponed not on a weekly basis, but on a monthly basis. So finally 3 years, and then I finished without the material.
Okay.
Yeah, I did some development of amplifiers for the research, and I wrote a lot of software. And then finally, you know, I was done, or seemingly done. And then I decided not to stay at nuclear physics, even though I had a lot of fun, because in between there was a disaster in Chernobyl, and then I decided, okay.
This was the nuclear power plant you're working in?
No. In Chernobyl, never, ever. But Chernobyl, you know, this was a nuclear power plant at this time Soviet Union, now Ukraine, that had a problem, and then there was a lot of radioactive emission, and yeah, we studied, you know, for companies and for government offices, we studied how much fallout was in vegetables, in milk, and so on. So that was quite a weird time, you know, because no one, at least of the outsiders, knew how much material we need. So, for example, they wanted the milk to be analyzed, whether there is some nuclear stuff in. So they sent huge vessels with something like 100 liters of milk, but we needed only a tiny little bit. So, and we had no way to get rid of the milk. So these vessels were stored in the hallway. And you know, milk, fresh milk, after one day, it's quite okay. After a week, it's a disaster. After 4 weeks, it's unbelievable. So, and we are not allowed to drain it into the sink because, you know, so much milk in the sink, that's not allowed. So we had to store it and find a way to get rid of it. So that was really kind of fun, you know, and similar with vegetables, you know. If you have salad, you just need a tiny probe, but you have huge bins, and then finally everything is crowded with the material. And it was quite a long time, so several months till we didn't have to do that anymore. Yeah, and then for me, it was something that I didn't want to participate. So I finished my diploma and left. Okay, and then I did, I had a girlfriend in Karlsruhe, and I said I want to stay over there, not at my parents' house. So I found a job in a software company.
In Karlsruhe? In
Karlsruhe, yeah. And then over there we did some, that was a development of CAD software. So that was quite nice. I worked a lot, and then finally, the girlfriend and we just departed. I don't want to get into these details right now, but then I decided I have to do other things, and then finally, I left to Würzburg, where I did my PhD thesis. And that was not in nuclear physics, that was now laser physics, spectroscopy. So the task was to levitate single droplets on a laser beam and to study first the shape, and then also the ingredients, and how you then, if you study ingredients, let's say you have a glycerol droplet with some water, then you can study the water content in the glycerol droplet, and then due to the evaporation rates, you can just find out, you know, how this is related to the environment. So, so that was more or less my
the project there.
Without getting too much in details, that was my PhD thesis, and I finished in it's now a long time ago, 1993.
1993.
And then I went to, I got an invitation to Yale University.
Yeah, I wanted to ask actually about the Yale University. How did you get the invitation to Yale University?
That was,
Which year was this, Yale University?
Yale was 94, so
94.
in 93 my professor, he had a conference in Würzburg, and Mr. Chang, who finally invited me, he just was working on a similar topic, and he wanted to see the lab, so I showed the lab, and I did some developments in software and optics, and he couldn't believe, you know, that with such a equipment that was not really high priced, we could do quite
experiments of this
experiments that he couldn't imagine. How he had already Macs, you know, and we had some really comparatively slow PCs, and I had spent a lot of time in optimization, so we could study time-dependent signals quite nicely, and so he was quite impressed and left. And I said, okay, from myself, he left the lab, and I did not know what he was doing. But a few weeks later, I got an invitation letter, and that was in February. And in April, I left to the US. So that was quite nice. So he helped, you know, to get the visa. You know, visa is quite a complicated. US is also not so simple. And all the requirements from Yale. If you think bureaucracy is a typical German problem, no, it's not. America is also quite nice if it comes to bureaucracy, and if it comes to giving you some pain to fill out forms or to file for forms, that's pretty.
How long were you in US again?
13 months.
13 months.
Yeah.
13 months in Yale University.
At Yale, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Professor, how did you decide to study nuclear physics?
How I decided?
Yeah, how did you come up, like, what was the motive behind it? Like, were you fascinated by nuclear physics or?
No. I was always a little bit skeptic about nuclear physics, but the thing was, how can I say? I love to study, and then the question was, you have to write a diploma thesis to end your studies. So, as I mentioned earlier, I wanted to get into biophysics, but biophysics, I did some seminars over there, but then I realized that it's not the thing that I want to continue. And finally, then I did the same thing in nuclear physics, and the professor over there, Mr. Kneisel, yeah, he was a nice guy, and you could see that the group was working well, so there was really a really good atmosphere. In other departments, you could see this that was more like slavery, you got a time to start, a time to end, and then you had to work hard, and finally you would be some unknown number in a long row of students studying some particular thing, and I didn't want to do that, So I thought it's a good idea to get into a group where there is also where you have some personal relation to things. And many things we did, we did in a group. So for sure, every work has to be done individually, but yeah, to work in a group helps to solve problems that you probably can't solve at the same speed alone. Yeah, I think many things are possible even if you're alone, but it takes far more time.
Professor, according to my research, so I did a little bit research. So you have worked in different countries. You have worked in India, you have worked in Japan, you have worked in Israel, you have worked in USA, different projects.
Yeah.
As far as I know. For me, I have one question. If you could highlight one project in all these countries, which was the most fascinating for you, most interesting, which one would it be, and what was the project about?
Yeah, so I think the one that really changed most of my life was the very first project at KBA. So that was the Karat 74. So that was a sheet fed press that was initiated, something like 1995. That was the beginning of a cooperation between KBA and at this time Cytex. Cytex is a company that no longer exists. It was merged with Creo, and Creo also does not exist. I think they are now part of, I do not know, part of Kodak or so. There was a close relationship between both of them, and Kodak is now also in problems. So there is a lot of shift in between. But the idea was that was a transition time. It wasn't quite clear whether digital printing would be fast enough, strong enough to cope with all the fields in graphic arts industry. And so there was the idea to have imaging units in the machines and also plates that can be imaged in the machine. So a new type of machine was developed. You have to know that in 1993, Heidelberg had shown a machine that was capable of doing that. That was, or even a year earlier, but that was never made available commercially. And in 1995, they introduced the QuickMaster DI, but that was also not immediately available. There were some, let's say, some difficulties to be solved to make it available to the market. And so there was the idea to have a similar project with KBA. It was known that also Manroland, at this time, Manroland was also thinking of such projects. So Cytex approached KBA, and somehow I got involved in it.
You were the head of research and development in KBA?
No, not at this time.
Okay.
I was really without any position, so that was quite amazing. So at Drupa 95, I had shown an inkjet system from Cytex. Okay. And for some reason, I think it was working quite nicely. They thought I could also help getting yeah, to build up or to help to get this thing run. And then I was just at the beginning quite often traveling with our former CEO to do all these things with Cytek. So that was quite interesting because, quite honestly, I've never headed, into such a direction to become, important. I was just always thinking I'll do my job in the lab, and then,
then my job is done.
Yeah, probably have some more parties and not to work so hard. But the funny thing is, it worked quite nicely. So the project evolved. There was a contract, and then finally KBA developed the printing part of the machine and Cytek the imaging. And through many years we developed the machine in different stages. And I could show that I can just find out and where are the problems. I can motivate persons quite okay. Let's put it this way. I was not shy of conflicts. So I think there is one problem. If you're always polite and you're totally shy of conflicts, then you don't move anything. So
get any further.
you have to find a balance. I think sometimes I probably should have been slightly more humble, but okay.
But listen.
But it was a nice project. It worked to a technical point quite nice, but I think the market just developed faster than we could develop the machine. So at the end, only a few machines compared to the initial projection were delivered, and also Heidelberg sold the QuickMaster DI not to the extent they planned to do so.
With the technology that you developed.
So the machine, yes, the technology, that's also, technology is something quite difficult to define. The imaging heads were developed by Cytek. The plates were developed by Prestec. Prestec at the same time was a competitor to Cytek because they were also selling imaging units. So, and then it gets getting really difficult, how do you find out what you really have to do, because no one is telling all of the secrets of the things. And similar with a machine, that had a totally new design. No such machine existed before. We had, for example, nice problems with patents, So we thought we have invented everything from scratch, and then another company, privately owned, very small, finally filed a patent lawsuit, and then we thought, hey, how come? And the funny thing is, they cited a patent that we did not know, but that was a KBA patent from the 1920s or so. 1920s, yeah. So that was a principal thing. At this time, not to be realized, but now it was just used against KBA, and then we could use it. So that was really a crazy situation. So I think that's what I find interesting, and also, to develop a machine, I think many people cannot imagine how difficult it is to have a complex system really make run and reliable. There are many things that interact, and many things, that knowledge in a company may be lost. You still will have the files or reports, but the heads that know about the reports and that know the details, they may be gone or put into another department, and then everyone expects this well-known company, they know how to do it, but work is always done by humans.
Exactly.
It's not done by a company. So finally, if this person is no longer here, then everyone expects, he did it, so it will still work, but somehow a tiny detail changes, and then everyone scratches head. Why doesn't it work anymore? Because there is a tiny detail that was overseen by another person. And then it's really like working like a detective, to find out what is the reason, why and who, and you have to run through a big company of 2,000 heads, and if you do
process.
and then everyone finally knows your name because you're always the person who, please tell me, please give me. Yeah, so
Okay.
that's quite, yeah.
Okay, Professor Schaschek, you have worked in HDM now for 12 years. 13 or 12?
14.
14 years.
So I think in May, no, in March 1st, it will be 14 years.
Okay,
Yeah.
then we have to change in the HDM website. It's 13.
That's okay. But finally, you know,
yeah.
the longer, the less you see the difference.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, okay. Yeah, 14 years in HDM, Professor. What made you switch your career from working in industry to working in academia and teaching students? How did you come up with this idea to come to HDM and start teaching?
That's a weird story, you know. I had to, when I did my PhD thesis in Würzburg, I had to give classes. University professors sometimes, you know, just give these things to their doctoral candidates. So I had to give classes in physical chemistry. And I liked it because, you know, this was an auditory of 300 students, so it was a huge hall. And the first time I was really frightened, but then I realized I can do it, so I liked it. But then I thought academia, with all the professors fighting for weird things, I thought, no, I don't want to become a professor. I want to do something, some real thing,
Okay.
and I don't want to be, you know, showing, see, I have this tiny thing, I have done it 100 times, and this student will do it 101st time, and this student will do it 102nd time, and then we find something that will be blow up your mind, or at least I will think it will blow up your mind. And so I said, no. I will get into the industry, and I will help to improve a little bit the world. And yeah, KBA changed. So I had quite a nice story. As you said, I was finally head of R&D, but I could also see that the budget was cut after a certain year annually. And then I started thinking, you know, what to do else. I liked my group. I still have a close contact to some of the employees at this time. And yeah. And actually, I got to the idea to apply for the professorship over here from acquaintance in the, there's an association, it's the Verein Deutscher Druckingenieure, so association of German print engineers. And there someone said, hey, why don't you apply over there?
Okay.
Yeah, and try whether they
will accept you as a professor.
They accept you. Yeah, and the funny thing is, yeah, I did, and they accepted, you know. So I was then thinking to become a professor, but I have to mention this. Then I got an email, hey, we want you, to make it short. And then I thought, okay. Then I asked for a contract.
Yeah.
The contract didn't show up.
Okay.
Then I didn't quit my job, you know, because you can't quit your job if you don't have a contract. Okay, at least that was my understanding. And I think most people would share it. And then it took something like a half a year that I just called over here in the HR department and Mr. Hübner, please, I haven't seen my contract. And then a friend of mine that I just met by chance said, hey, are you stupid? If they call you, they want you, that's finally the contract, you know.
Okay.
You won't get a contract, you know, like you have to work so many hours and your obligation is. So finally, then I said, okay, then I quit my job, you know, and that was really, my heart was beating like hell, because if you have the experience of industry, you never quit a job without having a new one, because else you're just, in worst case, you're somewhere in between or in nowhere land. And funny as it is, you know, I started and then I got a sheet telling, yeah, you're professor on time, so you have 3 years time to show whether you do the proper job. And after 3 years, yes, then I'm professor.
Yeah, at this time, this course was in German, right? Print media technologies.
Yeah, so this was in German, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a nice time, you know, to get here. And then the first lecture I did in a similar class like Introduction into Media Technology, there were some students from Würzburg, you know, and they had worked either at KBA or in a printing plant in Würzburg. And, you know, I showed up and they said, I told them that I was working at KBA, and they, oh, we check it, you know. They couldn't believe, because they worked in a different plant, in a different position, and, you know, not every single department has a close relationship to R&D, so finally they did not know me. But then, you know, it
worked out somehow.
That worked out, you know, and this first class, you know, I still have contact.
Okay.
Because, yeah, it was quite amazing, you know. Let's put it this way, they were quite confrontative.
Okay.
Yeah, hey, you lie. I know everyone at KBA, you can't be from KBA. But funny as it is, I worked there, you know.
Okay. Yeah. So, Professor, when the course changed from German to English, was this switch tough for you? Because you already studied at Yale University, you were for 13 months, maybe you had enough English knowledge. But like compared to teaching, for example, you know, conveying knowledge to students, how difficult was the switch for you from German to English?
I think I have improved my English quite a lot since we started. I'm not a native speaker, and I think everyone can hear that I have a strong German accent. At school, I have always had a problem with English. We had many languages, English, French, Latin. I just helped to have a Spanish class and a Greek class, because I was in favor of Spanish. At this time, schools didn't offer Spanish, so I asked whether we can have a Spanish class. So that worked out, but I'm not really, you know, I'm interested in languages, but I'm not talented. That's different.
Yeah, actually, so me and Professor Schaschek, we really talk after classes. We have some classes together, and we sit and we just have a nice conversation. You mentioned languages, that you're fascinated by language. So recently, Professor Schaschek has started learning Farsi.
Yes.
Persian, for you guys who don't know. It's the language spoken in Iran, Afghanistan, and Tajikistan.
Yeah.
So, Professor, why? Why Persian?
Why Persian? Yeah, yeah, that's quite, yeah, it's also a long, you know, always long stories. When I studied in Gießen, there was a student from Iran. We had a good connection, you know, and it was quite impressive, you know, that first the language was really beautiful. I think the sound of the Persian language is really beautiful. And yeah, so, and you know, he was the politest person that I had learned to know at this time.
Okay.
And I think still, you know, if I learn to know people from Persia, they are really quite very polite and you're very nice persons. Yeah, and so then some years ago we had a student from Iran too, who did his master's thesis at HTM in the German class.
Okay.
And I'm missing his name, Ezan. Ezan, he just organized an Iranian evening over here at HTM. And that was quite impressive. And there I learned to know Nima Bafi. Nima Bafi now is, yeah, I think he finished his studies in physics.
Okay.
Yeah, but he's also at the musical university getting classes, so he plays piano.
Okay.
And at this time he played piano over here. And then, you know, I just wrote him that I'm interested in listening to his music, and he invited us to events somewhere in Stuttgart there is a hall for Persian events, so that was really nice. So he was playing piano together with his father, who was playing the tabla. Is this tabla?
Yeah. It's tabla.
Or tavla. I do not, sorry, my pronunciation is always bad. So that was quite impressive, and yeah, you can even find both in the internet. And yeah, so I was fascinated by the Iranian music, the language, and then I tried to find out, you know, whether I could teach in Iran.
Okay.
So that was, you know, after Khomeini took over in 1979, I guess. Since then, the attitude of the Western countries towards Iran is always focused on the government. And I don't want to comment this, but I have learned so many nice persons from Iran that I think this must be two totally different entities. And at least to a certain way. So I said, okay, probably I could try to teach, but that was difficult. And there was a small window in 2015
that you could go to Iran.
That there was a discussion, and I missed the chance because I do not remember everything, but I missed the chance. Even the state of Baden-Württemberg was thinking of to do cooperations, and then I said, okay, I will try to learn Farsi, because you know, if you get into a country that is so different, if you want to get to a market and buy something, you know, you don't do this in English, right?
Yeah,
and if you sit in a cafe and want to drink a coffee, you don't do this in English. Then you will get a totally different coffee, yeah. And I assume, I do not know, yeah. and so I thought it's a good idea to prepare myself, and I found, you know, it's quite difficult. So first is writing from right to left. So if you write, all the curves have the wrong direction, so your arm will really get burning after a while if you practice letters, and yeah, but I still continue. Okay. And I think Shaima will teach me.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? So I will just get lessons in there.
Okay.
I do not know whether I get the goal, but that doesn't matter, you know, it's just fun.
Just fun, right? How far are you? Are you done with the alphabets and all?
No. I'm just, what is it?
The scene?
I think I have, sin and shin I have reached, and kaf, or
Kaf
and gaf.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and you know, sometimes, you know, I think the problem is really that each character has sometimes 4 variations. Yeah, so it makes it different at the beginning, in the center, or at the end.
Yeah, I think it really depends. If the character is in the beginning of the, for example, a word, then it's written different. If it's in the middle, it's written different.
Yeah.
Or if
and
it's
then
at
you
the
have
end,
these points on top of it, or underneath. And sometimes I remember, some days it really works nicely, and then I think, okay, so many points.
Is it really working?
I do not know. Yeah, I think it's just a question of practicing.
Yeah.
And what I really find interesting, you know, sometimes you can even hear it's a Indo-European language. So some words you can just, so peda is father. So that sounds similar to our language. It's not the same for sure.
Yeah.
So, and mother is mother. So you can just have, you can kind of link to it. In other words, you know.
Actually true, yeah.
Say a different language.
Yeah, totally different language.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Professor Schaschek, in this part of the program, I want to take a step back from your professional life and focus on your personal life a little bit. So, during the conversations, we had, me and Professor Schaschek, me, Siddharth, and we had like this product development class last 2 semesters. We had quite a lot of time to discuss topics other than studying topics and projects. Professor Schaschek, you have always described your family as your the greatest accomplishment. Could you elaborate on this? How come your family is your greatest accomplishment for you? Maybe some people consider their career as their greatest accomplishment. What's your view on this?
I think it's really quite complicated again, you know. I think life without family is nothing. On the other hand, no career or nothing is also a problem. So finally you have to compromise. If I look back, in my age you probably start looking back, I had, even though family is quite important for me, at sometimes the focus was more on working, finally not on career. That's, you know, I would never say that I was working for a career. Mm-hmm. It just happened. You know, that is something that I really, probably hard to understand. I never applied to become head of R&D, say asked. Mr. Zhang, he asked whether I would come to Yale. And I didn't think of getting to over here. Someone said, hey, you should do that. So yeah, so it's not a planned career, but when I did things, I always wanted to do them to my best. So sometimes it required more time. So especially when we developed these machines, that I spent a lot of time, and family was, I was trying to have at least the weekends, but for example, at the time in Radebeul, I had more or less 6 days per week. And then, if you have little children, they miss you. Let's put it this way.
Yeah.
And I remember when my second daughter, when I came back somewhere in summer on a Saturday afternoon, and I was trying to get to her, and she just said, who is this guy,
Okay.
Then I thought, okay, probably I've done something wrong. And then, I actually, that was the event when I started thinking, okay, then I have to reduce the workload, and I did. Work was possible, so it's just a question whether you just defocus a little bit, and and then I started to focus on the work in Würzburg again, and that was finally also quite successful. So and it's not so easy to have both. I think everyone who is really engaged in the work will find out that family or friends is difficult to play with, not to play. What is it? To
keep a balance somehow.
To balance.
Keep a good relationship.
Finally to balance. So similar with friends. I also played music. So this is something that was the first that I gave up. Because just to play music and to have it was all some years it was on Wednesday. Finally it was on Fridays. And I had no time, just to spend 4 hours Friday evening
Which was the instrument?
I play saxophone.
Saxophone.
Yeah.
Okay, quite interesting.
You need to have a loud voice. No, it's not about loudness, but I like the sound. So I have a tenor and an alt. So, and I think that's, I really like it, but I didn't play for a long time. And I was never a good player. This is another story. Why did I get into playing saxophone? When I was a child, I always wanted to play. My father said, yes, you can do that if you can afford it. So we couldn't afford it at this time. So I had to play at school. I do not know how it is in other countries, flute.
Yeah, the flute.
So I don't know. So from first to fourth grade, I had to play the flute, and I loved it. I loved it. So, and I said, I want to have a saxophone, but finally there was none was bought. And then when I was something like 30, I had a severe accident, and my right hand was paralyzed. And it took something like 9 months to get it back. And in between I said, okay, if it works again, I will buy a saxophone, even if I can't afford it. I couldn't afford it. So I just got some money from whomsoever, doesn't matter. And I bought it the next day. I could feel that my hand is moving again, because this was something that was really, I know. This doesn't happen so often, and I have to do something that is exceptional, even at least for me.
Do you still play saxophone?
Yeah, once in a while, but if you have long breaks, the fingers are not as flexible, and you need to have the tension on your lips. So that's a problem, and but it's still. Maybe when the children were young, so I played saxophone just to show them that it's a different instrument compared to the flute. So my second daughter, she started playing the clarinet. And all others,
So
piano.
They all play some sort of instrument.
I think that's also important. Humans should not only listen to music; they should also actively play an instrument or sing. You should sing. You should learn to sing. Because this is an instrument that you have always at hand, and it costs nothing.
Siddharth can sing really good Indian songs.
No, but it's really. I think it's not only that you have passive. You listen to it. If you do it actively, it's totally different. For example, the music that I was playing, I would never listen to. You know, this was Bavarian brass music. You don't send this into the public. I don't really like it. Let's put it this way. But if you play it, it's really totally different because you're in a group. There's harmony and there's interaction between the instruments. That's really great. That's really great. It's totally different whether you listen to it
or you play it,
or whether you play. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, Professor. Now we take a few questions from the audience. I would like to mention we don't have much time left, so we take 2 questions from the audience, and whoever wants to speak, they can have the mic. Who was going to first?
Okay, so I mean, I have a question. So you talked a lot about like what's important in life, and like there are different things. What would you say is the most important in life?
The most important thing in life, I think these are humans, other humans. I think, you know, the world, if it's buildings, yeah, nice, but I think the most important thing is that you can find a way to link to other humans, yeah, no doubt.
Okay, and one more question you can take from audience.
So, Professor, you talked like you did diploma in nuclear physics, then you worked in a software company, and then finally you started working in R&D department for KBA. So, what was your experience while working all those years in the industry?
My experience, yeah, to characterize it was a good one, but on the other hand, I think industry is not like over here. So they are always also focused on profit. So you have to balance, you know, whether you do the best or the thing that is paid for. And sometimes it's really difficult. But something that's really nice if you can, allocate resources. They are really more than over here. So you can really realize things that are difficult and demanding, and I think that's really nice. And finally, I know that maybe the view may seem naive. Finally, you contribute a little bit to improving the world. Okay, if this, this can be discussed, but finally, it's a case, you know. So the machines that we designed finally also help to lay off persons. So that was also heavily discussed because automation finally will just cut labor. But on the other hand, the quality was improved, and it's possible to get to media that were not accessible for others at this cost. So there is a balance. There's not only plus, but there's also some minus. But I think from my point of view, overall, it's possible to improve a little bit. And working in different companies probably would have been more, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
We take one more question from Samuel.
Okay. So we have had a short look at your career in the industry and also in academia. Is there one thing that comes to mind you would have done maybe differently if you could rewind time?
Many.
Just one, please.
Many. Yeah, I think, how can I put, yes, for example, when I did my diploma thesis at the end, you know, I didn't look at this for a long time. And then I found on the last page, there was a comment just for all the readers. It says a sentence, I do not know how to translate into English, but I'll try. So you start studying the world in the finest details, and finally you rely on your colleagues and on that you work together. And finally, in between, this was sometimes a little bit out of scope. So, and similar as a family, you know. So to balance these things is really difficult. And I think, yeah, sometimes I should have done slightly more for the family. Sometimes I should have done some more for my friends. But I actually do not know how I could have done it better. So that's really something, yeah, probably next life I can try again. Yeah, but
Okay.
yeah, and also, you know, we talked a lot about these things, and yeah, I stay here late at night.
Yeah.
So that's only possible because I'm here during the week. Because else, you know, my wife would really say I'm totally crazy, yeah, not getting home. But again, this is also something, you know, now I'm here since quite a long time. I remember my youngest son when I left to Stuttgart, and I'm here during the week. When we could see that he was sometimes not really happy, and on a walk, on a hike, he just told. Years later, he said that he was under the impression that I left because he did something wrong. Yeah, so probably this happened because I was not there enough. You know, that somehow there was probably only 5 minutes missing, that to make clear that I'm not leaving due to something that he couldn't even remember, but it was his impression, you know. And children, if they are young, sometimes they are really on the totally wrong track. So for me, this is an indication that at some time I didn't spend enough empathy or time or both, and that shouldn't happen. Yeah. So these are the things that I just have to carry. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So, Professor Schaschek, we have some rapid questions. So you need to have only one answer for them, one sentence answer.
One sentence.
Yeah.
That's difficult.
Yeah, but I think they're quite simple questions. What's your favorite drink?
Water.
Okay. When are you most productive?
This has changed. Now I think it's no longer at 6. I think now it starts at 9.
Okay. 9 a.m. or p.m.?
AM.
Okay.
Yeah.
Your favorite color?
Red.
Red color. Okay.
Yeah.
What was your first job?
My first job that I was paid for?
Yeah.
I was helping to renovate a house.
Okay. Unpaid?
No paid. I still remember I got 1 German mark per hour.
Okay. 1 German mark per hour.
So that's to nowadays standards is nothing. So that was when I was in the age of 13 or so.
Okay.
A neighbor just asked, you know, are you willing to do a job? And then I said, okay, if it's for money, yes. So we had, so this was, it was quite, I could do it, you know. So I had these, what is it, regibs? Does anyone know?
What's regibs?
These dry boards. So we had to just get the dry boards against the wall, you know, and to lift them, So I got some muscles.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was your favorite subject in school?
In school?
Yes.
I think I would answer differently. I really hated German.
Okay.
Because we had to discuss things, and I never understood why we would discuss things without outcome.
Okay.
Yeah, so the final outcome. So I think I'm really somehow oriented to see what can we do finally if we have discussed. You know, say there has to be something like I want to do this or that, or we agree to this or that, but only discuss for the sake of discussion. I think that was something that I didn't like.
And do you play any sports?
Sorry?
Do you play sports?
Yes.
Which sport?
I'm a runner.
Okay, and still?
Yes, and I do some sport, you know, some gymnastics in the morning.
Okay.
Just to be flexible. So what is this? Some yoga.
Yoga.
Some yoga in the morning, and sometimes I do some, some training with my sons.
Okay.
But with, like, what is it? Body weight training. Body weight training,
Okay.
So, things
Gym.
like this.
Fitness. Okay. Okay, Professor, for the last question of today's episode, if you had a billboard in the middle of the city and you were allowed to write one sentence on it or one word, what would it be?
One word.
Or one sentence.
one word or one sentence. I'm not good making things very pregnant. I think so. It's referring to the things that is most important. Humility.
Okay. That's it.
Yeah, I think humility. Yeah.
Humility. Okay. Okay, Professor, thank you for coming to our show
Okay.
today. Thank you so much. And I would like to thank the organizers. Thank you, Kunj, Siddharth, everyone who helped up building this place today. And Matthias, especially, helping every day with the technical stuff. So whenever I go to Matthias asking him if we can do this, he's like always, yeah, of course we can do it. And I was late today also, to be honest, but still we did it somehow. So thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you, Professor Schaschek.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And for your initiative.
Yeah, thank you.
So, and we hopefully we still find time to talk.
Exactly, true. Of
Yeah.
course, of course.